Boom.
Not official, but
Real loud,
It
real
sounded
aggressive.
official. I felt it. I felt like I was
perfect.
on.
The
Felt
change
the
in the
energy.
room.
Things are recording now.
Yes, exactly. So we're here with Eric Plamondon. I'm
Yeah.
going to do the French pronunciation
Please.
because I do have a French immersion background. So it's been a couple years since I've put that to the test. But you are Executive Director of Artspace, the leader in Manitoba's arts and cultural community, an actor in film, theater, comedy, and short films, frequent organizer and board member in the arts community, including Nuit Blanche 2013. So that was one of the first as well, right?
Yeah. Well, I was part of Nuit Blanche for about 5-6 years, but in 2013 we launched, I guess, an aggressive sort of attempt to have stuff in St. Boniface. So I was kind of like the St. B captain, and we got things going that way. So
That's cool. That's such an awesome event, like yearly event in Winnipeg, just to highlight the arts community and things too. I did want to throw in also a writer, artist, both visual and do you do paintings and sculptures and things too?
no, I do
No?
art. I do art installations.
Oh, okay.
And we'll probably get into some of that, which is always hard when you say like you're an artist. You're like, oh, what do your paintings look like? And I'm like, yeah, that's not what I do.
I have one painting on my wall right now, but it's mostly the smatterings of throwing paint at a canvas. And then I figured it was a little bit like cloud watching, where you can find
Pick
the
out.
different images and find things in it when you try hard enough. Finally, a director as well. I wanted to throw that in
Sure.
too. So what can't you do when it comes to acting in the arts? That's how we'll start this off.
That's a good question. I don't do musicals. That is outside of my range. And as I've started binge watching RuPaul, I should probably add that I'm also not a drag queen. That is not on the performance. But I admire, well, both very much so. But what drag queens are capable of doing is absolutely mind-boggling to me. Especially we have a few in Winnipeg, Pheromones in particular, that is taking drag and putting it into the performance arts realm that I admire so much. But not they're not likely to see me do drag in the next couple of years.
It's all about that. Well, isn't it getting outside your comfort zone allows for all that type of growth?
Yeah.
Well, it was funny because I was doing some research for this to come up with notes, and of the first video that I put on was one of your short films called Au Naturel.
Okay.
And so I've already seen you naked. So I feel like this is,
Well acquainted.
We're well acquainted even before sitting down and chatting. But I think it's one of those things. It's like to be comfortable enough to just like show that kind of, I'm trying to think of the exact right word, but just that vulnerability in front of the camera and things, and be able to share yourself that way has got to be an interesting experience.
Interesting is a good word. And a lot of my art practice is maybe showing things that are very natural, but still seem infrequent, and male nudity being part of that. And the way I ended up naked the first time was I had casted myself, which is always a tricky thing to do without doing it with a lot of orgueil or doing it with humility. And this other actor, but as the film was developing, it became clear that the other actor fitted better with the other role, the non-naked role. And I'm like, perfect. Oh. And it's one of those like, okay, well, if I ask people to do that, I should be willing and able to do it myself.
That's fair, yeah.
But once you're confronted with that, that is a whole other sort of like, how do you get ready? Like, I know how to get ready for a role, and I know how to get ready, like get the voice, get the grounding, but how do you get ready to get naked? Like, I don't know that you do, but you just kind of do it. But it was also like, now I'm just jumping, like I did another project this summer where there was like 13 Winnipeg models that I used, male models. And by models, I mean just normal people who I asked if they wanted to pose for me. And I remember one guy, and part of the session was as we did a Polaroid. So Polaroid takes about 2 minutes to develop. And as the picture's developing, I ask questions about masculinity. And since you're already naked, the barriers are dropped. So people were a lot more open and free in what they were willing to share and express. one of the guys, once the session was done, he's like, I don't know if I'm more scared of people seeing my cock or hearing what I had to say. And I'm like, right, both are excessively intimate, both are excessively scary when you put it out in the world. And so I guess that's how I feel about my art. I go, the intimacy is not just in the nudity, it's also what I'm sort of putting out there in the world that you don't necessarily control, because once it's out in the world, people are free to interpret, to cloud gaze, to see whatever image or interpretation that comes to them.
How do you go about asking someone to be a model for you in that sense? Like I feel like you might be met with some resistance.
Test with you?
Jayse, you want to get naked right now on camera.
What I've learned is there is no one way, and like anything, transparency, honesty, and everyone has different boundaries. So even in sort of posing nude, I go, we'll figure out what makes sense for you. So to go with no preconceived ideas of what that can mean, it's not totally true in the sense that you still have some sort of ideas that you want to come to fruition, but you have to be able to adapt them. And that's true in photography as it is in theater, as it is in writing. Like you'll have something that you want to do, but things happen to you. You got to adapt them. So yeah, I don't know if that answers.
No, I feel like that's a great answer from a director. Like that's a very directorial way of looking at things, is being able to adapt to kind of accomplish your vision, even if it means changing some of that vision in the end, right?
Yeah, and it's the piece too. Like if I want to write, act, direct my own stuff, then I only control myself. But if you ask someone to join, you have to accept that they're bringing some of themselves to it, whether it be their physical, emotional limitations, whatever it may be, or no limitations. They are bringing themselves, and you have to allow that to happen.
For sure.
I was thinking of the masculinity part of things, but I also wanted to share the story that I shared with you before,
right? Where
I was called up, sort of just to share. I guess you have an extensive acting and theater background as well. But
well, I went to school for film and theater. I wouldn't say extensive.
Well,
it's 4 years.
4 years is a big chunk of life, but it has to do with the feeling vulnerable. So I was called up. Message the day before a shoot. It was actually back when Gangnam Style was the big to-do thing, so that dates it a little bit. I don't know if it was 2000.
Some of your listeners might have to Google that. Yeah.
Depending on how old you are, you might have missed that.
How do you spell Gangnam, actually?
I don't quite remember. It's by Psy, P-S-Y.
There you go.
It's probably the one-hit wonder that would come up in that sense.
Well, it only had how many billions of views on YouTube?
It was
broke records.
It was ridiculous.
Right? Yeah.
It's weird when things take off in that sense, that just become that cultural phenomenon, especially when you don't even know the words that they're singing too. It's something that's cool that it transcended even language in a sense. It was just such a fun song. Anyways, I was messaged because there was a University of Winnipeg parody video of it.
Oh.
And it played on stereotypes and some different things, but the message that I got was, we want you to help out with this filming, and we would like you to be in your underwear dancing the Gangnam Style dance. And it's funny because she also said, you're the only person I could think of that would actually do this. And I was like, yeah, you got that right. You know me far too well. So it was funny. Flash forward to the next day. We're on a City of Winnipeg bus, and there I am 15 minutes after meeting people. I knew nobody from the U of W as a U of M kid, so knew her, and she was one of the main organizers of it. But then everybody else was a stranger. And then 15 minutes later, there I am pulling off my clothes in the dead of winter and in my underwear doing the Gangnam Style dance for everybody. But it's fun to be that vulnerable and to be in front of people and to be comfortable enough with yourself to do that. I think that masculinity side of things, like I did a play when I was in high school, and I feel that the judgment sometimes of that, like if you're in the arts, like there's the stereotype of like the gay arts person, and I feel like that's not necessary. Well, but it feels sometimes it's uncomfortable sometimes, just that you're not able to express yourself or to live fully as to what you would want to. I would say I was likely discouraged from doing things like that because I was Like I was judged in a certain way.
I was gonna say it exists in all memes. Like one of the things that I was surprised in the art show that I had this summer with those 13 guys is one of them. It was mostly people from the art, so people that I kind of knew somewhat. And one of them is a ballet dancer, and we started sort of talking. And he's openly gay. I think he might be the only openly gay member of the College Ballet at the RWB, which is shocking to me too, because I always feel like the arts naturally attracts a lot of gay artists, or some gay artists at least. And he was talking about how his milieu has a strict distinction between men and women. And men are judged on their capacity to accompany women, or to literally support women. So to lift them, to be their rock solid anchor. And he was saying how that kind of affects how he views himself, or how he views what he should be coming into as a man. As in, I need to be strong. I need to be able to, lift women. That's how I'm measured. It's not on finesse lines. It's not on how I partner men, because that rarely, if ever, happens. And I'm like, oh, that is so fascinating. That even in the world of arts, we sort of impose these very strict understandings of what it means to be a man. And we create those measures. And we often feel frustrated if we don't live up to it, or if we live outside of those sort of motivations.
Yeah, it's those societal norms, and just fitting inside that box is one of the most difficult things that people have to deal with, I think.
It's interesting. I never really thought of it as being a man as needing to kind of lift up women. I mean, I guess in some sense it makes sense, but it seems like also a old school kind of thought.
Way old school, especially like when I go to the ballet. That's not like when I go, oh wow, that was amazing as a lift. That's not those. It's not those moments, but it is the basis of what the discipline requires.
Yeah, those gender roles and playing part in that is just such a, like, it's strange to see, maybe not strange, that might not be the right word, but to see how things are evolving, and even in the next couple of years, how things like theater, ballet, like how some of those things, because the arts typically reflect the time period and the things that are happening in that society itself. So it'll be cool to see that evolution in terms of film and theater, and just some of the ideas that we can come up and even challenge some of those stereotypes as well. I think we need more eyes in terms of, I think that toxic masculinity is something that needs to change, and that needs to, we do need to be more accepting in those terms, especially in those hyper masculine places. But it's interesting that even in ballet you have those certain roles, those certain stereotypes as well. So I did want to know, so you have a background in political science. I do want to know how you got into acting and the arts in general.
You want to talk about politics?
At some point,
I
I'd
have
love
a master's
to
degree in political theory. I'd love to dive back in. Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those, I think it's sort of on theme. I moved away from the arts, because I went to university and time was usurped reading books more than anything else. But I was also really not comfortable with who I was, in the sense that to be a good actor, to be a good artist, you need a healthy sense of self, in both vulnerabilities and strengths. But also in being able to interact with others. So in high school, I was very much into theater, but as a closeted kid, I couldn't challenge myself in ways that the plays needed it, and because I felt if I was diving into roles that required me to be in love with a woman, then I needed to understand that part of myself, and I didn't want to admit to myself that I was gay. So I let it go for a long time. And it's only when I started re-challenging myself on those aspects that I decided to truly challenge myself, in auditioning for a play and going, can I do this? Can I? And at the time, it was literally just, I want to prove myself that I can go to an audition and do this. Not expecting necessarily anything to come out of it. but somebody saw something in the experience and kept inviting me to different opportunities, and I took the opportunities, and it allowed me to gain a voice, I guess, and also start hearing different voices. And there was something very attractive in that, and decided to sort of pivot in spending more and more time in the arts. And now that's what I do full time.
That's amazing. I think that happens to a lot of people. Is sometimes you have those inclinations of what you're interested in when you're young, and you pursue them maybe a little bit, but go away from them. I think that's something that's come up in a lot of people's stories so far, is that you're sort of directed towards this path of live comfortably, proceed, and live within the box of what people normally do. And I think even in my own life, it's been, okay, I want to feel that I'm progressing, but I also want to pursue these other things. And it wasn't until sort of I attempted my hand at a business, a youth programming business. That didn't work. And that forced me to ask some difficult questions of who I was at my core, what I wanted to pursue, and maybe what I didn't have the opportunity to before. And
if we want to go truly back, I was going to say sometimes picking something, realizing it's not for you, and moving on is great. Like the true answer of how I ended up in theater is one of those. Like my parents raised me and my sister in going, you had to be involved in some sort of art, in some sort of sport to be a well-balanced individual. And I still believe in that. But everyone in my family played piano. So the art form that was expected was piano. And I think a lot of French Canadian families will relate. But I lasted maybe 2 years. And it was clear I did not want to. So I drummed up the courage at a tender age of maybe 7, and I said, "Yeah, I don't think I'm, I don't think I'm doing piano anymore." And I remember my mom going, "Well, you have to do something." And it just happened to be we were listening to the radio, and there was an ad for a theater class, and I'm like, "Well, what about that?" And it was literally just the first thing that I heard, and they're like, "Sure." And I took to it, but it's one of those like, yeah, try something. If it works, great. If it doesn't, move on. And now as an adult, I go, trying things too allows you growth in different areas and makes you stronger. I used to run an art gallery, and running that art gallery made me a stronger actor without a shadow of a doubt. And being a stronger actor made me a very competent director of an art gallery too, because they all deal with the same sort of concepts of space, dealing with artists, ideas, different visions, adaptability. But people are challenged with that multiple hats, multiple perception. Like they're like, "Oh, we just want to know you as that one thing." Yet, as human beings, we're so much stronger if we get to tap into multiple universes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just kind of touching base on, I feel like you kind of grew up, especially during a especially hard time, because you're 37, right?
You just outed my age.
Sorry.
That is not cool.
we'll beep it out.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll edit it out.
Totally very comfortable with my age, yes. I was born in 81. I'm a rooster in June, so I'm a Gemini.
So the rooster on the that's the Chinese calendar.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I was a dragon for the longest time, but because I was
was a
born
cool
in
one.
early February,
Like a rat or
I'm
something?
rabbit.
Oh, that's not bad. I'm okay with rabbit.
So I was disappointed when I found out that I was a rabbit instead of a dragon.
Yeah, that happens in life.
But yeah, sorry. Back to my point. Where you grew up kind of during, I feel like a hard time. At least in my opinion, going through school, I was kind of one of those toxic people, and throwing out the gay word as a negative connotation was kind of a regular thing. Not that I associated it with being gay as a bad thing. It just kind of happened to be
the word that people use.
The word that people use to associate with negativity, right? And no one really came out as, especially when I was in high school. It doesn't seem like many people, maybe 1 or 2 people that if I think back, came out of the closet as gay.
So we are a graduating class of about 150. To my knowledge, I'm the only one who's currently openly gay, which statistically just doesn't make sense to me.
No.
But when you sort of look back and go, okay, what were the conditions back then? Yeah, nobody in high school was openly gay, not a single person. So you go, yep, that kind of makes sense. We also sort of came to conscientisation, a consciousness of the queer community at the height of the AIDS epidemic. So it was, it was in the news where you're like, can you catch HIV by sharing the same water fountain as someone? And those ideas stick with you. And that I'm very conscious that, as I was coming into puberty, you sort of go, oh, well, being gay is a death sentence. Like, so why the hell would I want that?
Right.
So you do all things to try to avoid it, and you convince yourself that you can avoid it. So yeah, I would say that despite that, I had a very fantastic upbringing in terms of dealing with my queer self. No, it was very difficult, very challenging.
For sure. I know. So I was in high school around 2002 to 2006, and I would say I was probably somewhat a bully. So one of those toxic people, and I especially made fun of people who are part of the theater community. I absolutely despised theater in high school, but I had no reason to, because I'd never seen theater, I've never participated in theater, I'd never acted. But I would literally go out of my way to call someone gay who was in theater, just as a negative connotation. And it's strange to me, because when I came into my 20s and kind of started to look who I was and what I wanted to do, theater kind of fell into that. And I still, even when I was 22, I thought I despised theater. But then again, I started thinking, I'm like, well, I never really gave theater a chance either. So when I took university, in my first year, I decided to take Intro to Theater. And this was when I was 24. So 6 years ago now. And interesting, I think part of it was that I had such an amazing professor at the University of Manitoba, but I fell in love with it. And A Few Good Men was actually the first show that I watched at MTC. And I loved it. Even though it wasn't theater first, it was a film, I believe, before it turned to theater.
Could have been in a book. Who knows?
Right, true. Which many,
it was a book.
It could have been, yeah, for sure. But from then on, it kind of just spiraled from there, and theater kind of became this place where I could express myself and kind of bring myself out of my own skin and open up a little bit. And even though I don't think I'm a particularly good actor, I always enjoyed doing it. And much like Riley, who had to act in his underwear, I also had to.
I would live life in my underwear if I could.
Act a scene.
With you.
I think you do. I think you mean only in your underwear.
Well,
like I'm assuming you're wearing underwear now. I can't tell.
Or a loincloth. No, I don't wear it so that I can truly be comfortable with.
Perfect. But yeah, no, I had to. So there was a scene I had to act in front of my class in my underwear, and it was a particularly, unlike Riley's parody, it was a much more serious scene of a drunk in a hotel room. Oh. And so it was nerve-wracking to say the least, but it felt empowering when I was finished it. Mm-hmm. So I find that whole turn of events from coming from being a toxic person to loving theater so much. It's just interesting how much you learn about yourself in such a short amount of time.
And I think that's why people like theater as well, is there's something so real that's happening on stage, even though there's nothing real that's happening on stage. As in, you are asked to play the drunk. You're not actually drunk, I think.
I wasn't.
He's a method actor. He gets completely
who knows back then?
I don't know. I didn't go to U of W, so I don't know their system, but I'm going to assume you weren't drunk. But the audience recognizes that there's something in real time happening in front of them that you, as an actor, have to allow yourself to live that moment fully. So as an audience, even though I couldn't do that, there's that minimum of respect if it's done well. Mm-hmm. And if anything else, there's what would it mean for me to do that, to be that person? So there's something very human that happens in that interaction that I feel doesn't, even though I do film and I love film, that doesn't happen as easily in a film, because that distance, that separation between audience and art form is bigger.
Yeah. You're literally watching through a screen rather than having it right in front of you.
Yeah, probably in your underwear on your couch. Doing some awkward.
I always find
with
like
Netflix.
the differences between, and that's one of the things I learned in school too, because I took film and theater, was the differences between, because one of the reasons I took theater to begin with was to learn the acting side of it, not only to realize that how different both sides of that were. There are similarities, but I feel like there's a lot more differences. One of them being that in theater, you're playing yourself or your character up, or in film, you almost have to play it down, because the camera is able to microscopically pick up those emotions. In theater, people can't see your face close up, right? So those expressions almost have to be bigger. In
Blinking an eye can mean so much on camera. It means nothing on stage. Yeah, it's interesting though. Like, as I'm developing my directorial style on stage, I'm taking a lot of cinema with me, and a lot of people, I don't know if accuse me because I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing yet, but accuse me of having a cinematographic style in theater, in the sense that it's not over the top, dramatic, musical-esque an approach. And I have a tendency of bringing the audience close. So if it means, like the last play that I did, the audience was literally on stage. So they were just a feet away from scenes in the bed, where small facial gestures matter. And there's something really cool about that. But I've never done a play at the MTC where you have 2,000 people. So I get you also have to give the same experience to everyone in the audience.
True.
So there's some challenges there, but there's some fun things that I think you can play with in the crossover. But it's also what I enjoy doing, is how you do that crossover, cross-contamination in art forms.
In terms of Artspace, how long have you been, what are you, executive director?
I am executive director.
How long have you been doing that? And I've also read somewhere that Artspace, like, I don't know who rented it to. I don't understand how this works. It's rented for $1 a year for 99
I'm
years.
not correcting
right?
you, because I love the myth that exists out there on Artspace. But yeah, so I've only been there for 2 years.
Okay.
So it still feels fresh, but I've been there long enough to still have an imprint on how Artspace is conceived and utilized currently. So that I'm excited about. We'll get to that. I'll give you the history of Artspace though. So in the 1980s, and both of you might not have been around, I was barely around, the Exchange District was not the way it is now. It was very much where questionable types would hang out, and not sure your parents would send you off to Cinematheque back in those days. So there's a group called the Core Area Initiative that was formed to sort of look at underutilized neighborhoods, or neighborhoods that needed change. The biggest success of that group is probably the Forks. The second biggest success is Artspace. So at the time, there were some artists, visual artists and literary artists, that were essentially squatting in the Galt building and said, hey, we heard you guys want to change the Exchange. That's fantastic. But with gentrification, usually the artists get kicked out, and that's not what we want. We want to put the artists at the center of the change, at the center of the transformation, and ensure that they have a permanent place here. Bill Norrie was the mayor at the time. Eugene Costera was the Minister of Finance at the province, and Lloyd Axworthy was the federal minister. And they all said, yeah, good idea. So let's figure out the model. So the model was essentially that the province would own the building. It's a building that was built in 1900 by the Galt brothers, and it was a dry goods warehouse, essentially. So they bought it, and they gave the arts community a 100-year lease, and that's how Artspace was born. Artspace was at the time essentially just the manager of the building, and it's been a success in the sense that the Exchange has changed for the better. Mm-hmm. And we have 22 arts orgs inside, and they're all stable. And they're stable because it's essentially rent control. The rent doesn't go up. They pay $7.75 a square foot, whereas everyone else around us pays about $26 a square foot. So a huge difference allows them to be stabilized and do what they do And what they do is amazing. Like I always hesitate to say it's 22 art orgs because I'd rather say we have 12 visual art studios, we have 3 galleries, we have a cinema, we have 2 production centers, we have editing bays, we have 3 dark rooms, yada, yada, yada. That to me is much more indicative of what's happening instead of just saying,
Definitely.
yeah. Oh, we also have one of 3 luthiers in Manitoba in Artspace, which is kind of cool.
Wow.
So what are some of the different projects that are happening there and some of the different people involved in the building? I know I saw the jazz festival people that are there, and then there's also, but you have a theater space in there like a private theater screening room?
Yeah, Cinematech is in there. So they do things that wouldn't pop up in your major theater. And they also do sometimes some throwbacks. So they're doing 2001 Space Odyssey in December, which is really cool in my mind. But they also do The Goose, which is from a local filmmaker that's getting some rave reviews. But it's about a 94 seater. So it's a small, intimate setting. What was the question? Was there a question? Just want me to plug what's happening.
Basically, just all the different groups that are involved with it and all the.
Yeah, and I mean, some of it you don't see because we still have a lot of literary types inside. So, Turnstone Press that puts out some books, but they don't sell it at Artspace or even Prairie Fire, which is one of the best poetry and short story publications in Canada, runs out of Artspace. So some of it you don't see as well. Same with the visual artists. Like it's a workplace for them. But during First Fridays, so the first Friday of every month, a lot of them will participate in that open door sort of concept. So you come to the exchange and all things art is an open door for that one day kind of thing. So there's a lot of that happening. Since I've been there, I've been trying to push the concept of also utilizing the whole building and not just things behind doors, but hallways and whatnot. So the first year that I was there, we did a Lost in Art Space event that literally had events from the rooftop to the basement. So every floor had something to the point that we also converted a storage closet space into a disco room to sort of go, this is what we mean by all space can be transformed for the purpose of art. And I'm very interested also in sort of going, we have a community purpose, a community raison d'être. Like we were born out of letting art transform a community. So this past summer, we did these art lounges in the Drayway being that tunnel that sort of cuts through the building. It is one of the features that allows the whole Exchange District to be a historical district. But essentially, we invited this artist from France to come wheat paste over 2,000 fish in the tunnel. We had a bar going, and quickly we decided that instead of letting the artist put up all the 2,000 fish, we let people put it up. So anyone who was curious to pop their head in, which included the boys of Pan Am, and I call them the boys of Pan Am. Pan Am Boxing is beside us. And a lot of people who stay there are people who are recently out of prison, so they have a place to work and exist. But they were interacting with these women art lovers in $2,000 dresses, and they were both shooting the shit on how cool this is and what do fish represent and how the oceans are dying, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, this is the power of art. Like, nobody owns this tunnel, even though Artspace owns it. But people naturally, use this as a public space, and art allows those barriers to drop in that simple interaction because, wheat pasting is the same you did when you were 4. You mix water and flour together and you got glue. And so anyone and everyone can do that.
That's awesome. There's something about the rejuvenation of downtown Winnipeg and the Exchange especially. I saw in sort of a different aspect, but the Jets coming back has been a great thing just for downtown Winnipeg in terms of the party that was had on Portage and Main, and just it was everybody, people of all walks of life, of all different races, and it was just this like everybody was excited about life, about the Jets coming back, about these things. But now we've seen this rejuvenation more people are living downtown, more people are working downtown, there's more restaurants, the art scene, it seems to be booming, there's all sorts of events downtown. So it's this culmination of things that's really amazing.
I totally agree with you. I think building the arena downtown was one of the best moves we could have made. The Jets, as great as they are, and sometimes they're painful because they take up a lot of space. But, it's 13,000 people coming to downtown on a regular basis for a Jets game. It's just at my art salary, I don't get to go to Jets games all that often. So there's maybe a bit of bitterness there, but I keep going. I think we should do better in being able to meld those two communities, because the same people who go to Jets games also go see the ballet, also go to see theater, and there's a giant jumbotron drawn there. And I always go, how cool would it be if you could see some like Manitoba short films that are played in between periods or whatnot? And the point, I guess, is just we haven't found a way of sort of blending those two communities yet. I think we can get there because we coexist. We all coexist in downtown. Most of the arts happens downtown still, and you definitely see when there's a Jets game.
I think that's a fascinating idea, and like you said, there's definitely people who go to those games who are interested in all those aspects, and it'd be interesting to kind of break down those barriers that exist right now between I'd say art and sports, even though I think sport as an art is an art as well. But it'd be nice to see that kind of melding, like you said, of the two.
It's so interestingly enough, last year when the Jets played against Las Vegas, there was a big spectacle previous
That's exactly
to the
what
game.
I was thinking about. Yeah.
I thought that specific one was a little bit overdone with the knight fighting the
Jets.
Vegas-esque, which is like, over the top.
Yeah.
But
yeah, there was that. It was the showmanship was pretty.
Did you not want to know though how a knight would defeat a giant jet? Like I was very intrigued. I was like, how will he defeat?
I would like to see that
Apparently
in real life. I
swords
don't
beat
think it would
jets.
play out
Play the
quite
same way.
Unfortunately, we did lose the series, but yeah, there's definitely. You think of the time in between periods where they're flooding the ice. Why couldn't there be people? I know that my family in particular go and sit around in a circle and just talk, and other people within the sports community or whoever is around sort of comes up. And if you know them, because it's Winnipeg, everybody knows everybody, then you just start chatting. But why wouldn't there be things happening, things that people can interact with in between those periods, even if it's on the concourse or it's on the ice or it's on the Jumbotron?
Sure.
I mean, spectacle and keeping people interested and just having that something interesting for people to engage with in between periods. They're always looking for it, so why can't that meld happen?
And they're also looking for that sense of pride. Like, Winnipeggers are insanely proud of their Jets, but they're also insanely proud of their art scene. So you keep looking for elements that are like, well, this doesn't exist in a different city. This is why we're cool, and this is why I get to brag about how cool we are. And I go, you have a giant arena that also welcomes shows, most of the time shows not from local artists. So I go, which is fine, because I want to get stimulated by Sere, and I want to get stimulated by, I don't know what big artist came in recently, but
I'm not too sure recently.
whoever that might be. But I go, if you can splash some benefits to the local community as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, open it up every once in a while to the local art community, theater, film, whatever.
Yeah.
Whoever has a plan for that.
We're coming up with ideas in this room. I don't
There
see
we
why
go.
it can't happen.
Make it happen, right?
So, is there a project that you're most proud of being a part of or proud of acting in?
It's a good question. It's like, I don't have any kids, nor will I ever have kids, but I feel like you're picking your favorite child in that question. And I'm totally lucky enough to say every project that I was a part of had merit on multiple levels, both personal and sort of community or public. So you sort of go, whatever my last one is probably what I would tell you, or whatever my next one is probably what I would tell you. But I don't know. Man, I'm gonna give you a better answer. I went for lunch with one of the former director of the Secretariat was his name is Mai Yee. He was trained in fine arts in Grenoble. Oh my God, I don't even want to say how long ago. But he came back to Winnipeg and he got taken under his wing by Pauline Boutade to work with Secretariat. So he kind of abandoned. He abandoned visual arts to go into theater, and he did that for 42 years. And so now we've been having lunch and sort of actually having chats about how both exist in different ways, and there's a lot of things that translate. And for him, that's something new because he was very much like, this is how theater works, and that's what you do. And to see that sort of like illumination in a 76-year-old man is fantastic, where it's breathing new life into what he wants to do. And what he wants to do, he's a fantastic painter, and what he wants to do with his painting is just great. So it made me think of like one of the things that I was most proud of doing is in the French community, Réal Bérard was the reference for visual arts, even though he didn't make a living out of visual arts, which is very typical, definitely in Manitoba. He actually worked for the province of Manitoba in the parks department. And one of his jobs early on was to actually do maps of our rivers. But in the maps that he would do, he wouldn't just draw out the river. He would add songs. He would do drawings of local people or a flora, fauna. So the maps had such a richness that they were clearly a work of art. As time went on, he kind of embedded himself in multiple art forms. He created essentially the snow sculptures that we know at Festival du Voyageur. It is a medium that he created with others around him. All that to say, when his 80th birthday was hitting, and he's still active, he's a cartoonist in La Liberté. He does a weekly cartoon. So at 80, now he's 83. He's still doing a weekly cartoon. So for his 80th birthday, I said, well, I want to do a show at la Maison des Artistes. And his response was, I've never had a show in the gallery. And I'm like, how is this possible? Like, this is unfreaking believable to me. So I decided that, this means that it's a lot more than I thought it was going to be. Like, I was just going to collect some of his work and slap it up on the walls. And it's not totally true because I never do that. But I realized that this has to be a bit of a bigger thing. So I created a bit of an homage to him. So I invited 12 artists of various age, of various mediums, to do a piece that was inspired by his large repertoire, which allowed me to match works from various mediums. And I quickly realized that I didn't have enough with one gallery, so I did it in 3 galleries in St. Boniface. It was a fantastic show, but his reaction was so powerful in that he was reacting to other people's works more than his. Like, he was touched that his work was there, but he was talking to this one young Iranian guy who had taken this picture of water, and he's like, the same passion that exists in your art is what I remember by going down the river and drawing this. As in, I recognize that same passion. And I'm like, the fact that this conversation is happening right now is unfreaking believable to me. So I would say that's one that stands out in my mind on how you can rethink of doing things that allows those conversations, those moments to happen.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's those moments that that stick out and that you remember throughout those successful times, those things that you're most proud of, or just that moment wouldn't have happened had you not organized, had you not been part of it. And so it's so cool when you can look back and just realize like the part you played in that, but just genuinely get to enjoy that too. I think one of the things that came up while you were talking is Matthew McConaughey's speech, where I think he's accepting an Academy Award. And he was saying how, and I think it's true, and sorry, I forget his name, the gentleman that his 80th birthday.
Réal Bérard.
Réal Bérard?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Nicely done.
I'm trying to keep my French pronunciation good. But it sort of resonated with his story too, is Matthew McConaughey said that him 10 years from now is the person that is most driving him forward, and that's who inspires him. And it's like, yes, getting to that next level, that next day, just pushing yourself to be better and being willing to evolve with your art form, with your talents, and just go in that direction and find different things that you can accomplish. I think that's what should inspire everyone in a sense. It's you can take those different people. I keep hitting this thing. I'm gonna take it off.
Take it all off. Go to your underwear.
Keep going. All right. Gotta be really comfortable. I mean, I would. Hi, Mom.
Saying, you saw me naked. I feel like it's only fair.
We'll see. Maybe at the end we'll just do like a quick striptease. Throw one.
Bonus footage.
Actually, well, I have 2 strip songs, and This is my full on. What is it? I'm thinking of like Law when you just come clean with everything, but I'm 1 for 1 in male strip competitions. So there you go. That's my. It's overseas. I don't know if it really counts.
It
but
still counts.
I have 2 songs. One came about this week, but one of them's The Darkness, I Believe in a Thing Called Love, because there's something about that song that just like gets you going. And then Marilyn Monroe this week. I actually didn't know her singing career.
I don't think I know it either, outside of Mr. President.
Yeah, that's what I thought of too. I went, oh yeah, she did sing, but I think it actually was a part of film that she sang had a full album come from that, or just the songs within the movie itself. So they're very sultry, very coquette, very, they're exactly what you'd expect Marilyn Monroe.
Do you know what film it was from?
I wish I could. It actually comes up if you type in Marilyn Monroe. I just look on Spotify. She came up on my pizza making playlist, and then I was and it's the song itself is called "I Want to Be Loved by You," but that one's a good one too. I really forget how I started off on this tangent.
I think you were talking about like pushing yourself. Matthew McConaughey, yeah.
Matthew McConaughey and pushing yourself to want to be better.
Striptease, Matthew McConaughey, it fits.
It's the art form, No, but it's really just pushing yourself to want to be better each day, and that's something that I've started to live by and take on as sort of a personal mantra. Is just trying to make the most out of each day and the most impact.
And I don't think you're looking for perfection. Like if I think of those shows too, there's an easier way of doing those shows. As in, I could have easily just taken his artwork and put it up, and it would have been a perfectly respectful show. But getting another 12 artists to match that up, to do it in 3 galleries, is one of those like, oh, why are you doing this? Like, you're just complicating your life. For what purpose? And the purpose reveals itself once you understand what it is that's driving and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And this is where I sort of go, it's okay also to get it wrong sometimes. Because if the intent is genuine and authentic, those moments will happen. And it might not necessarily be in that perfection that you're looking for. And that's cool. Yeah.
You learn so much more from your failures than you do your successes. And I think that helps you build immensely more. If you were constantly to win and just be successful and do all these things, it's really just that, it's almost that fear of failure starts to drive you in a certain sense, where you go, I don't want to have this feeling again. I don't want to hit the pit because I didn't, emote the way I wanted to. I didn't act the way I wanted to. This didn't come out the way I wanted to. And so that starts to drive you to actually want to be more successful. And then, so you can have more of those moments and you can have some of those awesome displays. I'm actually thinking of one of the aspects I'm most proud of is, and it actually has to do with the arts in a certain sense. So it was a costume parade when I worked with a pro sports team. And I organized it, and it was these kids in their Halloween costumes walking through, and they had cheerleaders following and mascots, and it was the full band playing. So there were the drummers and so it was this full parade, and all the kids were beaming and smiling and walking proudly in their costumes, and I'd even pulled people that were just actually part of the sort of on the periphery that didn't have costumes, but just so they could be part of it, and
nice.
It was one of those things. There were more people involved. Everybody was sort of welcomed. And it went, when you envision something and I was pulling pieces from a lot of different, but I had this image of just joy and happiness and watching this parade sort of continue and go through and I could feel the emotions from it. And that was before it had ever happened. And then when that comes and that actually comes to fruition, that vision, that's one of the most rewarding times. And that's one of those moments where I went, this went exactly as planned. And that doesn't often happen. And it took a lot of work, and it took thinking on my toes and making sure that there were enough people involved. But it really is those small moments that you can make happen, but just being able to, in the moment, make it work. And that's what you become most
when
proud
that
of.
plan dissipates and it feels like just this organic, spontaneous moment of joy of something happening, and you're like, well, I know I put blood, sweat, and tears in figuring this out, but good. Now it's just happening in of itself. People are feeling compelled to join. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
Do you maybe have I mean, we've all experienced failure, but going on what Riley was saying
none.
about failure, none whatsoever. What would you say is your, maybe
Biggest failure?
Not biggest failure, but the failure that you learned the most about yourself from?
I think one in talking about Mai Yee, I'm triggering in that he was doing this play, and he says it's one of the best plays that he did in his career, called the Repas des Fauves, and the premise of the play is absolutely beautiful. It's set in Paris during the Second World War, so German-occupied Paris, and these 6 people gather because it's someone's anniversary, and someone outside the block kills a German officer. So an SS officer goes in every apartment to grab one person in retaliation and kill them. So he walks into our place and he recognizes the owner, and he's like, oh, well, why are you guys all here? And they're like, oh, it's my wife's birthday. And he's like, yeah, you know what? I get it. I know you. I'll be nice. I'll let you guys finish the supper, at which time I'll come and take 2 people. But I'll let you guys decide which 2. And then he leaves. So the whole play is how do we pick amongst us who's going to go get killed? Anyways, that's the premise of the play. Super good play. Repas des Fauves. Look it up. Anyways, it's. I think one of the first questions was like, "What do I not do?" Well, I don't do accents very well. so first, I had to figure out how to do a Parisian accent, which was a bit of a challenge. And now we had like 6 people in the play, 7 plus the SS officer. So we all had to find that common accent, which was a big challenge. And in that, it also got revealed that I have a few speech impediments. And the director did not, rightfully so, have time to correct my speech impediment. And so he was stumbling and sort of going, I can't direct you because I can't get over the fact that you need to be able to pronounce in Parisian accent to the ends of the rooms. And until you figure that out, your role can't evolve. So I left there completely defeated, going, well, I'm freaking tongue-tied. Like, what the hell do you want me to do? Like, I do not know how to overcome this. I do not. So it was one of those like moments where like, well, that's the end of my acting career. I thought I was onto something. I thought I was doing well. Clearly, I was fooling myself. This is not for me. The next day, I'm like, well, I'm still stuck in this contract, though. So I might as well figure something out. And I ended up working with the guy's sister, Mai Yee, who did some one-on-one coaching. And over the next week, retaught me how to speak, essentially.
Wow.
And it was one of those like, you can... It would have been perfectly legitimate for me to go, yep, I'm done. The harder thing was... And the more humbling thing is, who do I call and ask for help? And it's one of those, like, it's hard to ask for help. And it's hard to sort of go, why am I asking for help? I'm asking for help because I suck at something. And I don't want to suck anymore. And I'm super proud. And he still looks back at that moment. He's like, that's the play where you legitimately became an actor. Because you did what you needed to do to deliver on the role.
There's something special about being able to put the ego aside. I think those are the moments that lead to the most growth. I had a similar thing. I don't want to keep going back to sports. A similar thing happened in football where I was basically frustrated with my role on the team. And so I put that ego aside and worked with a trainer in the same way and got better a whole off season just so I could play. And didn't get the exact role, essentially, that I wanted with the team. But then ended up having an extreme impact, and we ended up winning a championship that year and played both offense and defense. So it's one of those like maybe you don't get that exact image of what you're hoping for, but maybe you can push your skills, you can grow, you can do all sorts of things and get to your sense of there. And that's a success where you're willing to, that growth is then what pushes you forward. You can choose to quit at that point. And a lot of people do, honestly. That's when you're faced with that adversity. I think it's something Joe Rogan often says, where most people quit at 80%. And that's and that could be exactly where that, I'm a good actor, I have this as my talents, but when you're willing to go outside, when you're willing to grow, go outside that comfort zone, put the ego aside, you can get to that next level and you can get to that 100%. And then those often become the times of your life that you're most proud of too, because you had these options. I like to think of life as different paths you can follow. So you could have quit and maybe found another path that was fulfilling as well.
Politics is great.
Exactly. Right. And
I've got a degree in that. Might as well use it for something.
But then you wouldn't have the life you have now, and it wouldn't necessarily be as fulfilled. And so you have to know when to go all in or go in on the things that you really believe in and that you really want to accomplish in life. And I think that's one of those pivotal moments in your story. That's what I'm projecting onto it, but it seems like a pivotal moment that's led you to where you are now. So that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and we tend to, as human beings, to sort of answer those questions with, oh, there was adversity and then I overcame it. There's tons of stories too that our brain is geared to forget in terms of, no, I just failed at that. Like that did not work out in any shape, way, or form that I wanted to, and that's okay too. And it's funny how people rewrite history as well. Like I was talking to this guy. You might not tell, but I used to be way into sports, and I still am. And he remembered me from 1999. It was the first French-Canadian Games. So the first time that every province and territory was amassing. I think it was in Moncton, the first ones. And he thought I had quit the provincial volleyball team to do improv instead. And so he was saying, it's like, good choice on you, because look at your great art career now, blah, blah, blah. So that's the narrative he had framed in his head. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because I didn't make the volleyball team. He's like, well, of course you did. I'm like, no, I wanted volleyball over improv for sure, but I got cut. I didn't make it. So actually improv was my second choice, or the thing that was available to me. And he's like, but you're so good at it. And he's like, isn't that a good thing? And I'm like, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's what happened. Yeah. And I made the best of what was available to me. So
yeah, in that sense, you kind of overcame adversity in kind of a different way. Instead of going at it in terms of volleyball, you took a right turn into art.
Yeah. Still play volleyball. It's a lot of fun.
Volleyball is a lot of fun. I'm terrible at it.
I'm just 5'9". My vertical is awful.
5'9" and no vertical. That's a story.
I just like spending time on I play beach volleyball, and I'm like, there's something just about being outside.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Anyways.
But much to what kind of like Joe Rogan said, Les Brown, a preacher and motivational speaker, also similar to what Joe Rogan said, is that almost everyone everywhere almost makes it. Almost makes it.
Okay.
But then they come into contact with adversity, and most people can't overcome adversity. And the one thing that you need to in order to overcome it is the responsibility to overcome it. So responsibility in the sense that you need to realize what you're doing is not working. That's not working, and find a way to fix it. So much kind of like how you figured out that, I have this speech impediment, and one way of looking at it is like, okay, I could be done. That's it. My acting career is over. That's it. I can't overcome this.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
That's a big one in the acting world.
I can try to overcome it, right? I can find the best possible way, and you didn't even know who to reach out to, right? So it's like, who do I talk to say? And there's a bit of humility in that too, because it's like, well, I have to come out and straight up say, I suck at doing this.
You have to admit to a bunch of people that you have a problem until somebody can tell you, oh, this is who you should work with.
Right. So you took responsibility. Oh. So I feel like that's huge in overcoming any adversity.
I totally agree. I guess what I'm doing with the second story is sometimes the opportunity just isn't available to you anymore. And I think that's something that's always motivated me. And I can think of even back in high school, when I keep wanting to plug politics back in, but I was running for student council in grade 11, and for vice, well, we used Canadian terms, so c'était vice premier ministre, vice prime minister. Is that how you say it in English? And I lost to this very lovely girl who was very competent, probably better at it than I was. But I was super bitter because I'm like, well, I want to be on student council, so now what do I do? And the answer was, well, there's nothing to do. Like, you lost. Like, get over it. But I'm like, well, why is it that I wanted to be on student council? And the answer is, I wanted school to be more than just studying, and I wanted the school itself to represent something more than just this place where you study. So I founded the first green team in the school because I'm like, well, I have time, I have drive, I have energy, and I wanted to change. And I don't need to be part of the student council to make that change. I can just do it without them or with them. So I guess that's also that overcoming doesn't mean that you accomplish the goal that you set out. It might mean that you boil down to, why is this important to me? What do I want out of it? And what are the other paths that get me there, or that give me that same sort of reward?
So how do you feel that the support is from politics or even the city towards artistry? I know you sort of that you touched on that a little bit in that story, but do you feel that there's enough support for the arts community?
No, absolutely not.
And what would you like to see start to change in terms of their support and even how we can grow sort of either these community spaces or just grow a community that allows these things to happen and that creates opportunities for artists to succeed in this city?
I mean, it's hard to just give the easy answer of funding, but funding is part of it. We haven't seen increase in WAC, Winnipeg Art Council, or Manitoba Art Council funding in over 20 years.
Really?
It's not totally true. The Winnipeg Art Council has seen a bump, but it hasn't transferred in operational dollars that they give to organizations. And it's one of the reasons also that Artspace can't raise rent, because there is no new influx of operational dollars. And that makes paying for lights, paying for heat, paying for salaries excessively hard. And that kills me, because I feel like there's a lot of people who might be professional artists, but don't, just because you barely live. So that pains me, but I get that will always sort of be part of the debate, because as an artist, you can do something interesting with $100, and you can do something quite interesting with $1 million too. So the other piece is the spaces available, and proper spaces. There's still a lack of proper spaces, and now I think of the dance community, there's a severe lack of places for rehearsals for dance companies, and we have some of the best in Canada, if not the world, right here. Sometimes it's also that public art piece. Like, Winnipeg loves Nuit Blanche, but there isn't a lot of site-ready places, and there's a lot of things that are cumbersome for the type of art projects that we would like to do. So a lot of barriers with either permits or things that are tagged on. And I'll use the example even Lost in Artspace that I did. It's a building that I control. And I think I needed 9 different permits.
Wow.
To throw an event in my own building.
That's crazy.
And I love sort of going, at la Maison des Artistes, I created the first permanent liquor license for an art gallery. And the answer that I had originally was like, well, we don't grant that for art galleries. And I'm like, well, why not? It's a place of art. You do it for cinema. You do it for any other entertainment. Why not that? So I love this sort of like, just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you can't do it. And it was the same for Lost in Artspace. They're like, well, we've never licensed the whole building. And I'm like, but you could. Does anything stop you? And they're like, no, we just never done it. But it means that, yeah, there's a lot of, you're stuck in a bureaucracy that I get wants to protect, because that's their job, to protect the public, but instead of being geared towards how do we get to yes, they play the safe, just no.
Yeah.
And it's very, very frustrating because the margins of the arts are so small, and the spirit of the arts is to exist in the gray zone. So to find people who want to play in the gray zone with us would be very nice. Because it's okay that sometimes sort of go, oh, you want to do something with fire? Great. But maybe you should have a fire extinguisher near you. And you're like, yeah, you know what? That's a good point. Like, you know, we're open to all that. But to simply say no, which often seems to be the case, is just so counterproductive, especially that I see, you know, some of the transformation that's happening, what Synonym is doing with wall to wall and sort of doing like full hotel murals in parts of the city that most people want to avoid. I'm like, awesome. But one of the reasons that they get to do it there is that it's a building that has been sort of forsaken. So there's not a lot of people telling them no there. So I wish there was spots that were a little more valued that were also more geared to saying yes.
Hubs, and how do we get more collaboration, more funding? How do we get more people excited about the arts community and local talent so that we can keep them at home? And I think that's maybe one of the biggest struggles.
I think one of the key points that kind of resonated with me was permits. Actually, and it's crazy. And I didn't learn this until I was in film school, and we had to shoot a production film, and part of it we wanted to shoot downtown. And then we realized how hard it is to actually try to do that, and how much money you need to get those permits, and how it's just roadblock after roadblock.
And one of the reasons why Winnipeg is such a film industry hotspot right now is because of the film tax credit. Which is crazy because it offsets all those expenses. But I do want to come back to sort of like, because it is that struggle, especially as a gay artist. Everyone's like, why aren't you in Vancouver? Or why aren't you in Montreal? Like, that is where people go. And it's true. And there's a lot more opportunity in that niche opportunity, in the sense that, you know, if you want to do just one thing, you have more likely to have success in those bigger centers, but there's also so many more people doing the same thing. So you do have to create a niche expertise. And I go, that's the genius of the art scene in Winnipeg, is that you have people doing multiple things. So you have musicians who are scoring the soundtrack of short films or long films. You have those same people sort of creating the musical elements for theater. You have my set designer for the last play that I did is an architect student. And I said, hey, you have a creative capacity. Would you build a set? Would you design a set? And he's like, yeah, actually, I would love that challenge. And I go, in big cities, you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have that permission to sort of think outside the box of who you can sort of involve in your project. So I go, Winnipeg is the perfect playground for those who don't want to be boxed into a niche art form and sort of want to exist in the creative sort of sector.
Yeah, so you're allowed to wear more hats within Winnipeg, whereas that opportunity might not be afforded to you in those big cities. So you wouldn't be able to do what you do and direct and act, and you might have to pick one rung, and that's where you would evolve, and that seems limiting in a sense too. So I sort of think of it as the big fish in a small pond, or a small fish in a big pond. But it's difficult to find what's the area of most growth, because if you have more opportunities, you get to do more, you get exposed to more. That's a sense of growth. Or you can find that niche, and then you can find the top of that. It's this weird balance.
I think it's just the pond is different, and I go, and it's also what the influences are. Like, I think even of what Julie Nagam and Jamie Isaac are doing at the Winnipeg Art Gallery right now. They're totally busting down some conceptions of what museums are like. And I use museum as a slightly pejorative term in the sense that it's often stiff, white glove art kind of stuff. And what they're doing as curators, as Indigenous curators, is making the museum accessible to people that didn't have access to it or didn't feel like they had access. And the way they're doing it is by breaking down certain conventions. And I go, yeah, that can exist in Winnipeg, and it's better accepted in Winnipeg because the WAG doesn't need to exist as the big museums of other cities. It can do its own thing, and it's coming to terms with that self that I go, it's cool. So I go, understand what is the size of your pond. And you don't have to compare yourself to bigger ponds because you don't have to be the bigger pond. Or if you realize, hey, I'm not a pond at all, I'm a stream or I'm a brook or whatever, awesome, own it. And I think Winnipeg is in that mode right now where it's like, screw it. Like, we don't need to be like Toronto. We don't need to be Montreal. There's something about the conditions of Winnipeg that is attractive right now. And it does involve winter, which I'm adoring. So what Joe and Mendel have done with Raw and Almond with the restaurant on the river and sort of going, yeah, you know what? We have creatives and we have this frozen river and we're going to do something come hell or high water. Well, not high water, I guess frozen water. That's cool. And I think we're in that vibe right now in Winnipeg, that we don't need to understand ourselves as a small or medium fish.
So then what is your vision for Artspace, your film career, and even your directing career? What's the ideal future that you see and the impact that you want to have with it?
Yeah, that's interesting. When you read about successful people, they always seem to have like a 5-10 year plan. And I always go, God, when I was 27, did I think that I'd be sitting where I am now? No, I don't mean like
Directly here on the Be the Change podcast.
on a Sunday. But and the answer to that is no, definitely not. I didn't think this is where I was heading. So I don't want to have a firm idea of what it looks like when I'm 47. But I do know what kind of projects that have meaning for me, and also have meaning in that sort of community relation. So I will seek that. And I'm also not closed-minded enough to sort of go, like, I assume it'll be in Winnipeg, but if it means that I also spend, 5 years in Halifax, finding myself and failing, so be it. Because Winnipeg is also one of those places that it's easy to come back to, and you can always come back to. And sometimes feeding experiences outside to bring it back in whatever form is cool too. So I don't have a vision, but the vision will for sure involve the arts, in the way that the grittiness of this city has been building for I don't know how many decades, and that is very addictive in the right sense of the word.
So
I just said I have no vision, and now I'm going to tell you what the vision of Artspace is.
There we go. Perfect.
So one of the things that we want to do is expand the footprint. I have not, Artspace has not had a new tenant in like 20 years, which is both a checkmark on success, and it's also a challenge because there are some new art movements, organizations that have obviously popped up in the last 20 years, if not in the last 5 years, that are as deserving of support and a stable place to sort of work from. So I am highly geared to going, well, it is my job to actually find spaces for these organizations, which means tapping into certain opportunities that present themselves. One of which is just, I'm so sensorily deprived. I'm pointing, I don't know where I'm pointing.
I don't know either.
But somewhere around here, not too far, there's a 2.4 acre plot of land that's been rebaptized the Market Lands. And I say rebaptized, it's just across the street, across King Street from City Hall. It was the original Market Lands of the city of Winnipeg. And then during the brutalist architecture phase, they decided to plop a giant gulag-like police station that has now been deemed obsolete. So they will tear it down. We're saying, great, if this piece of land must utilize some sort of public service, public component to it, and it's in the Exchange District, the creative campus of Winnipeg, that means the arts need to be part of this project. So Artspace is in the process of sort of determining what that means in terms of square footage, what it means in terms of physical art spaces? Will it be an art gallery? Will it be that sort of rehearsal space? Will it be artist studios? They're talking about creating some housing. Could it be some live work units for some visual artists? All that is, we're in the process of sort of figuring out how that can be carved into the development.
One of the things, I think it's something that's been on the periphery of what we've been talking about, but in terms of race relations, and especially First Nations people within the city, we've received the title in Winnipeg as murder capital and most racist city in Canada. And I wanted to know if art and film have the power to heal and bond people within this city, and maybe how you've seen that impact people as well.
Well, if you get shanked, chances are the arts will not be able to solve that for you. And I make the joke in the sense that in this last municipal campaign, one of the mayoral candidates said that if you go downtown, there's a good chance you'll get stabbed. And a lot of people who work in the downtown took offense to that, evidently, in the sense that we work downtown and never do we think that we're threatened in that way. So did want to take a bit of a jab.
Stab might be an aggressive
at that
word.
argument. But I get that, there's a lot of people who still feel that maybe coming to Cinematheque is uncomfortable. Especially, we often talk about, well, where do you park? And you have to walk, and how are the different modes? So there is always a consciousness of how do we make the experience feel as safe as we think it to be. But we also exist in a core neighborhood, so there's all types of people who have this as their home, as where they live, play, and sometimes work. And so I think the art has a capacity to bridge that, to engage in that. And I use the example of our art Drayways as one of those, as in it was accessible to everyone, it was interactive for everyone. And we talked about, how theater and others have a capacity to transmit people's stories. And we're seeing a lot more diversity in the stories that we're hearing. Even if I think of the theater season so far in our major productions, PT is right now giving voice to a Japanese actor, writer, director who's telling the story of his dad who survived Hiroshima. We had earlier in the season, Prairie Nurses was the story of two Filipino women who came to, I think it's a small town in Saskatchewan, to find work. And we're seeing that throughout, and that's very empowering in that, I've lived in Winnipeg for 37 years, and I can't remember the last time I saw a Filipino story told on stage, yet we have the largest Filipino population in Canada, maybe? I don't know.
I think so.
I'm making up
that's right.
stats, but there's a lot.
Per capita, probably.
Yeah. So I go, why haven't I heard those stories? But I mean, it was the same motivation that I had to start developing my own art practice, where I'm like, well, where are the queer artists telling our stories? So I quit Real Pride Board because I wanted to start making my own films and hearing those stories sort of projected. So yes, I think we're starting to sort of demystify the concepts of racism, or the reasons why Winnipeg is often easily accused of being racist, and we're counteracting that by allowing all those stories to sort of come to surface or have a more public space to sort of exist.
It's great that we're seeing more representation of our diversity, because that's something that I think we've talked about previous, but that it's affected our lives directly in terms of the experiences we've had, and it's been at many times very, very rewarding. Obviously nothing's perfect, and even our downtown isn't perfect. That safety is a big aspect of people coming downtown, and it seems to be developing in a positive manner with all the things that we've talked about. More people downtown and living downtown and having more eyes about and more security, and all these things seem to be developing towards a good place. And so it's great that we have these opportunities now to engage with the arts, to go see sports, to go to restaurants. And so it's awesome to see these bonds happening
And
between people.
I hope it's not in a segregated way, in the sense that, if you, crossing someone who's Indigenous in downtown is far less scary if you already have Indigenous experiences. In the sense that barrier of like you treat a human being as a human being becomes easy if you have those relationships. Like I keep thinking, there's a lot of people who keep going, "Oh, you're my only queer friend." I'm like, well, I'm glad I'm one of them. In the sense that like the minute you start in having those interactions, it becomes less abrasive or less scary to sort of understand those universes, and which is why I always go, no, I think Winnipeg is getting some of it right, in the sense that we are engaged in the truth and reconciliation process. Could we and should we do more? Absolutely. But we are engaged, and that's not true throughout Canada. And I don't think we should be aiming for the lowest standard. We should be aiming for the highest standard. But I take comfort in sort of going, most Manitobans in some way or shape are engaged in it, if not by simply going to a theater and hearing that we're acknowledging that we're on Treaty 1 territory, or more and more hearing Ojibwe language being used. When you walk the shops of downtown, most businesses will have a welcoming sign in the 7 Indigenous languages of Manitoba.
I didn't know that.
It's a nice little sign that says like Tanse or Anin. I don't know them all 7 of them, but and once you know what it is, you start seeing it, and it starts sort of being more accepted.
Sure.
And yeah, I think that's cool.
The last question I wanted to ask is, what would you say to inspire others to make a positive difference or change in their life? Along those same token, but
I don't know that I kind of want to answer that, in the sense that I'd rather hear the answer to that, as in what do people need from either me or society to feel that they can affect the changes, because I feel like most people want to be involved in some sort of change. I don't think anyone sort of wakes up and goes, you know what, the world is perfect exactly the way it is. I want to change a thing. So I go, what, or and maybe I guess it's more like, what is it that you need to continue to be engaged in your community, in whatever, how you define that, or engage in whatever that you want. So I'm hoping that I am part of those conversations, and it's not one of those like, oh, my door is always open. It's like, no, I want to come meet you wherever you are, and I want to hear where you are, and see if there's something that we could collaborate together with, or if you just need also someone in your audience because you need to feel like you've been heard. Great, that's awesome too. So
it's an individual answer is what I would take from that, is people have to figure out for themselves what that positive difference and impact they want to make is, because it takes all of us. Canada is the mosaic. Everybody around the circle collaborates, and the culture stems from that. And so it's our own identities, it's our own individual experiences that come together, and that makes Winnipeg as a whole. So it's that collaboration. Yeah, it's listening to people's plights and difficulties, and we all have them. And who knows what the exact right answer is, and I think that's right. There's not necessarily a right answer, one thing that people can do, but I think we've so many aspects of the conversation we've had today, whether it's dealing with toxic masculinity, whether it's encouraging people, and even sharing your story. It's like, yeah, we can evolve past that too. And it's that exposure to people. It's being willing to have those conversations. It's maybe, not having to have 7 permits to do things, like encouraging the arts, because they're the reflection of our society, and they are people's stories. And so it's great once you get to connect, even if it is through theater, film, whatever medium it is, song. When you start to connect with that is when you can actually understand and even then you become more empathetic to others.
Yeah,
And that's a big transition.
I know it was a bit of a cop out to your question, but I
Not at all.
go, it's also why I do what I do, in the sense that I hope what I do in terms of art form, because it comes from an authentic place and an honest place, will inspire others. So I sort of go, and it just seems egotistical to do it, but I'm like, I hope people see my films and read what I write. And because I know it has the power too. Like, I remember this lesbian woman reading one of my short stories that is very much from a gay male perspective, and she's like, "Man, I so identify with that story." And I went with, I didn't know you were my target audience. But it is that sort of like, and she said for that same reason, she's like, when I started reading this story, I'm like, it's probably not going to be for me. But in that sort of like, halfway through, she's like, man, your human experiences and your human challenges, when you wipe away this sort of variables, are at the essence exactly what it is that I'm challenged in doing. And she went, I don't feel like I'm honest about that right now, and maybe I need to start being a little bit more honest about it. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, I'm so glad you read the story. And so I guess that's the piece to it that I sort of, in my answer, I'm like, I hope we just continue to inspire each other, and allow that conversation and inspiration to change and adapt, dare I say, evolve, progress, to sort of happen. And even listening to these, not to plug this own podcast, but I mean, that is essentially what you're doing. You're inviting people into a conversation, and if it is just to listen to the conversation and see what stems from that's already a huge contribution.
And I did really want to thank you for joining us and sharing
thank you very
your
much.
story,
Thank you for the invite.
all your experiences. I really connected with. I'd like to thank Future Leaders of Manitoba as well for connecting us. I listened to your speech for you were. Did you win, or did you were one of the?
Did not win, but I was one of the finalists.
Oh, thank you.
And listened to your speech and just really connected. I mean, yes, you have the advantage of being an artist type, an artistic person that's comfortable with the camera, but I really connected with you and your story, and then to get to learn more of it is an awesome and awe-inspiring experience.
I appreciate that
Thank
very
you
much.
again. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna bring up the where can we find Artspace? Where can we find you physically and online?
Artspace
Right
is
here, right here,
right now.
a 55,000 square foot building in the Exchange. We're just kitty corner to Old Market Square. It's 100 Arthur Street. And yeah, usually there's always something happening to discover in there. As for me, I don't know. I do have a lot of my short films up on Vimeo for free. So if you Google Eric Plamondon plus Vimeo, you'll find them there.
I'll be sure to link it in our YouTube as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. The rest, I sort of go keep your ears open and see where I pop up. And I often go, it's okay to not always be attached to the projects that you're doing, and just have the project sort of exist. So if you know that I was behind it or not, I don't really care. So I would just go enjoy the art that exists. A lot of it, I'll plug this. Most artist-run centers, we have a lot in Winnipeg. No, that's not true. All artist-run centers in Winnipeg don't charge an entry fee. So if your budget is tight, or if you want to impress your date, bring them to an art gallery, it's free. And I think it's one of those people are still scared of going into because they don't know how to act.
Be yourself.
Just be yourself. And even if you walk in and walk out after 3 minutes, that's fine too, because there's no cost of entry. So you have literally nothing to lose. But one great way of doing that is during the first Fridays in the Exchange District. So the first Friday of every month, most galleries and a lot of artist studios are open, which means too that if you walk in one gallery and it's not your bag of tea, that's fine. There's going to be another one to discover. But I would also say, look beyond. I don't do divertissement, I don't do entertainment, I do art experiences. And most artist-run centers are geared towards that. So it's not about what art will look good in your bathroom. It's what message or what experience can we offer you.
is there any place we can find a calendar or even to figure out where the events are in terms of downtown? It would be cool to like, and then I just want to know for people wanting to go to these places, like where's the best place to find information?
Yeah, that's lacking. We could do a whole podcast on that. Like we used to have publications that you walk into a downtown, grab a physical paper that tells you where to go. There isn't one website that captures all. Like Tourism Winnipeg does a decent job. We still have tons of pamphlets for like we literally have 3 boxes full of pamphlets in Artspace to tell you a bit what's happening around. But there isn't. I don't feel like there's one congregated source for.
Maybe it's time for that to change then.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. But if somebody wants to take that on, go for it.
And then, did you want to share the website for Artspace or social media for yourself?
Sure. So Artspace is one that also doesn't do that in the sense that we let the tenants speak for themselves, so we don't plug all their art shows. So it's not like there's anything specific to find on Artspace, but it is art-space.ca. If you take the dash out, you end up on a online auctioning site for art, which is cool too if you want to go do that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan. Like one of the reasons that I like Nuit Blanche too is that you let your senses guide you like that night, where there is a map, but I go screw the map and just keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, and kind of follow the path that guides you, because there's art to discover in different recoins, in different little corners. But I guess that's what I would say too, is challenge your conceptions of what spaces are right for you and not right for you. And even thinking the work that I do with the Sector Maria, a lot of people are like, oh, it's too bad I don't speak French, I can't come. And they're like, oh, actually, no, they have tablets where there's sous-titrage, there's subtitling in English. And it's crazy on how much you can actually capture without even language, because words are just half of how we transmit information to you. So I don't know, go discover all the little spots in Winnipeg.
Go on an adventure. Yeah.
All right, Riley, where can we find our podcast?
Woo! Be the Change on YouTube and Spotify and iOS and basically any other audio format you want to find us. Our email, as always, is info@bethechangeYPS.com. Don't forget about, there was the one with dots, but forget about that one. info@bethechangeYPS.com. Announcements. No, lots of podcasts coming up. Maybe in 3 weeks or so, you might not see as much hair on my head. Crazy, right? Subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening, and stay humble, stay happy.
All right, take care.